Just as there has been valiant and honourable kings, there has also been sadistic and brutal ones. In this video, I'm going to be covering but one of these brutal and sadistic kings, and what life was like under his horrific reign. Also, in case you're wondering, I do have COVID at the moment, so if I sound a bit off, that would be why. The child that would become the ruthless subject of this video, Ivan the Terrible, was born on the 25th of August, 1530, and it appears the seeds that would sprout the terrible man he would become were planted from a young age. His father would die when he was just 3 years old, and his mother would follow not long after, passing away when the young prince was 8. While the royal court descended into a frenzy of murder and intrigue following his parents' death, the young royal Ivan and his deaf-mute brother Luri were treated no better than a couple of peasants on the street. There were even times when Ivan and his brother were left clothed in rags and on the verge of starvation. These early experiences would progress from a mistrust of the nobility to a fiery hatred as he grew older. So unsurprisingly, when he became Tsar soon after, although not with full power yet as he was still too young, he had nothing but revenge on his mind. This revenge would have to wait though, due to the political climate, so he instead took his anger out on animals, reportedly pulling the feathers out of live birds and throwing dogs and cats out of windows, something which I'm sure most of you know is a telltale sign of psychopathy. His violence wouldn't be limited to only animals for long though, and at the age of only 13, he finally bared his teeth. You see, even though Ivan was technically Tsar at this point, the powerful Shusky family were by this time the de facto rulers of Russia, having emerged victorious from their power struggle with the second most powerful family, the Belskis. It is likely the Shusky family were now in a comfortable and relaxed position, having finally secured their grasp on the young prince. However, nothing could have prepared them for what the enraged prince had in store for them. At a feast held in 1553, Ivan accused the most powerful of the Shuskis, Prince Andrei, of mismanaging the country and had him arrested and put to death. It is unclear exactly how Andrei met his end. One story states that he was torn apart by hungry hunting dogs, whereas another more credible story is that he was simply beaten to death by his jailers. Regardless of how Andrei met his end though, the young prince's bloodlust had finally begun. After this first show of brutality, things actually remained surprisingly calm for the next few years, with full power being transferred to Ivan on his 16th birthday during a surprisingly peaceful period. It is worth noting though that there is a story around this time that he ordered the construction of the magnificent St. Basil's Cathedral, and upon seeing the finished product, he blinded the architect, so he could never produce anything so beautiful again. It is unclear whether or not this actually happened though, but it is a testament to his reputation at the time. What arguably tipped Ivan over the edge from a somewhat reasonable but sadistic ruler into what he is known as today though, were two events that took place in 1558 and 1560. The first being the betrayal of his great friend Prince Kurbetsky, who defected to the Lithuanians in a war they were currently fighting, and helped hand Ivan an embarrassing defeat. This betrayal, unsurprisingly, left Ivan furious, and likely only solidified his view that his country's nobility were out to get him. The second event was the death of his beloved wife Anastasia in 1560. Ivan was certain that his wife had been poisoned by his enemies, and while no evidence of poison could be found at the time, a 20th century examination of the Tsarina's bones uncovered unusually high levels of mercury, suggesting that the paranoid young monarch may have been right. After his wife's death, the young Tsar's initial reaction was to remove himself from Moscow and travel to Alexandrov, which was a town located 120 kilometers northeast of the capital. There, he wrote 2 letters signaling his intention to abdicate the throne. Following this, the upper class in Moscow attempted to rule in his absence, but when this proved impossible, an envoy was sent to beg Ivan to change his mind, which he ultimately did, but under the condition that he was given the right to seize the lands of those who had betrayed him and execute anyone he suspected of treason. The desperate council agreed to these terms, but giving the young, paranoid, noble-hating, psychopathic Tsar the authority to execute anyone he suspected of treason would prove to be a very costly mistake. Who would have guessed? Upon Ivan's return to Moscow, he set about separating the country into two administrative areas, one of which would be ruled by the nobility, and the other governed by himself in any way he saw fit. What he saw fit predictably turned out to be torturing and executing the vast majority of his political rivals and pretty much anyone else who got in his way. To police his new territory, Ivan created the oprichniki. Dressed all in black, the oprichnia were Ivan's personal bodyguards and enforced who roamed the newly created territory, torturing and executing anyone Ivan suspected of betrayal, which unsurprisingly turned out to be a lot of people, given, he's paranoid and all. Horrifyingly, the favourite execution methods of the oprichniki included boiling alive, impalement, being roasted over an open fire, and being torn limb from limb by horses. It got so bad that it was a common sight to see the inhabitants of towns and villages fleeing for their lives when the word that the oprichniki were in the area reached them. None of this, however, would hold a candle to the terrible fate that befell Novgorod, Russia's second largest city and Moscow's most powerful rival. Convinced that the city's leaders were conspiring against him, Ivan ordered an assault on the city in 1570. Priests and monks were rounded up and beaten to death, while their churches and monasteries were ransacked. Prominent merchants, officials, and noblemen were also tortured and executed during Ivan's rampage. It is said that many of these poor souls were roasted alive on specially constructed frying pans. After hearing all that, you might be hoping that at least their wives and children were spared, but this is Ivan the Terrible we're talking about, so of course not. The wives and children of those men were tied up and thrown into the river Volkhov, with any who tried to escape being pushed under the icy waters and drowned by soldiers armed with boat hooks, spears, and axes. Unsurprisingly, after these horrific events, it would take centuries for the city of Novgorod to recover. At least one of his saving graces, actually probably his only saving grace at this point, was that he had never harmed one of his family members. That would, not very shockingly, not last forever though. And in 1581, upon encountering his heavily pregnant daughter-in-law in a state of undress, he beat her so badly that she miscarried. Upon hearing the news of the loss of his unborn child, Ivan's second son confronted his father. Ivan, who always carried a sharpened baton around, which he used to beat anyone who displeased him, hit his son over the head so hard that he collapsed and died several days later, showing that not even his own family was safe from the cruel man anymore. Fortunately, the brutal, sadistic king would finally die on the 28th of March 1584 in Moscow, after suffering a stroke whilst playing chess, and I don't think anyone will argue that his death definitely fared well for the country he ruled with terror for so many years. Well, that's going to be it for this video, guys. I hope you could tolerate my sick voice for this long. As always, if you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. But with all that being said, and as usual, I hope you guys all have a great day, night, wherever you are, and I hope to see you in the next one.